I'm in love, he's a soldier for freedom. I'm in love, he's the one I adore. As he stands there so tall and so handsome, and he says he'll be mine forever. Down east of Alexa, and I'm cruising through Block Island Sound. I have chartered a course to the vineyard, but tonight I am Nantucket bound. I took on diesel back in Montauk yesterday, and left this morning from the Bell in Gartner's Bay. Like all the locals here, I've had to sell my home. I'm too proud to leave a word by fingers to the bone, so I could own my Downeaster Alexa. And I go where the ocean is deep. There are giants out there in the canyons, Captain can't fall asleep. Well, I got bills to pay and children who need clothes, and oh, there's fish out there, but where God only knows. They say these waters aren't what they used to be, but I got people back on land who count on me. So if you see my Downeaster Alexa, and if you work with the rod and the reel. Okay, so in answer to a series of questions, I'm not going to teach anyone how to play the tenor guitar. I'm just going to show you the things that I specifically use it for. In the set, Downeaster Alexa by Billy Joel's in the set at the moment. Steve Knightley's song For Show of Hands, Transported, is in the set at the moment, and since doing John Richard's album at the beginning of last year, I've kind of revived an older and very beautiful song of his called Roaring Water Bay. So there'll be a link at the end of this little video which will go to a Martin historian on YouTube who can explain the history of the tenor guitar far more accurately than I can, and why Martin started making it at a variety of purposes, but one of the purposes was to a certain extent replace the four-string banjo in bands. You know, the banjo exists to be a loud instrument in order to compete pretty much acoustically with the tremendous racket of drummers and brass sections and all the rest of it. And of course the struggling instruments are always the bass player and anyone playing any kind of acoustic rhythm instrument, and to a certain extent the piano as well, you know. So it's no wonder that someone eventually invented methods of amplifying all these instruments, and thus the tenor guitar was, the banjo, the four-string banjo, the tenor banjo, and indeed the tenor guitar as a dance band instrument were eventually usurped by electric guitars and electric basses and methods of amplifying basses and so on and so forth. It sort of escalated until you arrive at Slipknot. But there you go. Anyway, enough of that. So you would have seen, those of you who are old enough, like me, would have seen pictures of, or even if you've been lucky enough to see them on black and white TV, groups like the Kingston Trio, American commercial folk groups, but nevertheless an absolutely essential part of the folk revival in America. You would have seen almost every other band actually featured a tenor guitarist, and they're all pretty much tuned to just the top 4 strings of the guitar, G, D, A, E. Is that right? Yes, G, D, A, E. And then, so there was a lot of that going on in the 60s, and then there seemed to be a lack of interest, and you could pick up the original pattern sort of Martin tenor guitar in the States even as little as 25 years ago in second-hand shops for very little money. So we haven't seen much of them recently, until I think we can probably blame a young man called Seth Lakeman, who is certainly one of the people who has repopularised the use of the instruments, and he uses 2 or 3 of them, all in modal droning or dulcimer type tunings. But I think a lot of people have now settled for bouzouki-ish tunings, and certainly the one we use is of course C, G, D, G. Which is so we'll stick with that, the same intervals as G, D, A, D, and so C, D, E, F, G. So if you play that, you put one finger there and you duplicate that and then the next string up. Of course, you get that classic droning. So immediately you've got a sophisticated dulcimer in your hands, which is kind of quite useful. And so that's the sort of principle I apply all the time, except that I don't do so much of that. What I'm actually doing is trying desperately to play melodies embedded within the chord without hitting the bottom string unless it's absolutely necessary. Was a bayman like my father was before, but you can't make a living as a bayman anymore. There ain't no future for a man who works the sea. There's no island left for islanders like me. Now I drive my down easter Alexa, more and more miles from shore every year. Since they told me I can't catch no strikers, and there's no luck in sword fishing here. And the melody of Transporter. So that's the only point at which I'm going to the bottom string and fretting. So all the rest of that is completely on the top 3 strings, desperately trying not to clunk the bottom string with my flat pick and so on. And that's kind of how it works, really. So the 2 primary keys to utilise as many open strings as possible before you start capping, of course, are then G and C. Look at C, then you get a very sonorous C. good for playing tunes, you know. Or perhaps like my tune, Jenny's Waltz.
I've 25 acres and not for my needs, but it's other men's cattle, oil, water and feed. One day I will pay for the life that I lead. I'm a thief from the edge of the moor. My uncle and me got it down to an art. We set off for stealing long after dark, through the fields and the farms where it's easy to park, and the way back home is secure. One cold winter's night at the Tavistock Fair, stolen sheep in the trailer and rain in the air. I felt the flat tire and the reach for the spare by the side of the A38. But the nuts on the wheel must have rusted in place, and I'm under the landy we're spraying my face, with only an hour to get out of that place, cursing our bad luck and fate. For there's no transportation down under, no gallows in the old county jail. The best in the morning we're flying where we're warning, the worst in the evening we're back out on bail.
And you don't need to spend a vast amount of money on these things. All the performance clips are on the Oddie copy of the Martin Tenor guitar. This is another one. It kind of looks pretty much identical, you know, construction-wise. Obviously, it's sunburst and all the rest of it. But this is a Tanglewood. It was absolutely brand new, and I found it in a shop for 130 quid. And the guy had a lot of Tanglewood guitars there, and he just kind of got it in because it was there. And nobody wanted to buy it in that particular part of Oxfordshire, which is sort of quite funny. I think nobody figured out what it was, you know. So in the end, one January sale, there it was. I bought it for 130 quid. It's superb. It feels extremely good. It's well constructed, well built. It doesn't quite have the same exact resonance as this Oddie Tenor. This is the first one that David built for us, and this one's still going strong. Steve has a rather beautiful and rather more ornate one which David built later, yeah, and so there you go. You don't need to spend an absolute fortune. Of course, Nick is carrying on from where David left off, and again I'll put the link at the end of this so that you can get in touch with Nick. Nick's knocking these out now, and you know, to absolutely this design. In fact, most of the people who are making hand making tenor guitars seem to be following the Martin pattern, which is well, you know, it kind of can't be bettered really, but. and just So the basic chord structures are very simple, and if you're a bouzouki player already, then you'll know exactly where to put your fingers. It's just a case of you know, sort of thinking about it, and you know, obviously that's G, and that's C, you know, and that's F, and then you've got various variations. If you've got a C. The other song that I use it for quite a bit is, which I haven't done for a long time, but in fact wasn't doing it myself for a long time because we were doing it with Chef Hans. But that, of course, is the Bruce Springsteen song, which I particularly love, which is Youngstown from the Tom Joad album. Or, I've forgotten, maybe it's from Nebraska, can't remember now. Down in northeast Ohio, back in 1803, James and Danny Heaton found the ore was lying in a yellow creek. They built a blast furnace down there on the shore, and there they forged the cannonballs, helped the Union to win the war. In a Youngstown, my sweet Jenny, I'm sinking down here in Youngstown. So that's it. That's my current working songs repertoire using the tenor guitar. So I hope that's useful to some people. Links coming up at the end to various things you might find useful. There's going to be a lot of these because obviously a lot of us have quite a bit of time on our hands. They laughed at me for building the studio first before starting to renovate the house. The laugh is now on me. 40 years worth of letters home on New York State, photographs from another world, causes to cheer the lonely heart. How she wished she could see them all on the streets of Skibbereen, but she knows the brothers never will return to their Irish homes again. Irish way.